Hi, and welcome to the OrgDev podcast. So, organization design is a critical component of organization success. Get the right architecture in place, and you can catapult your organization to success. Get it wrong, and it can destroy value and create enormous efficiencies. But what is it? How do you do it? And what are the different approaches? To help us explore this, we've invited the brilliant Jonathan Edwards of Kanso Design to unveil some of the mystery behind it. And he's done it in organization design in many fascinating organizations. He's worked at iconic organizations such as Experian, British Council, Lloyd's, Burberry, John Lewis, BBC, and even London Heathrow as well. He co-founded Kanso Design in 2019. He has over 20 years experience in business change, program delivery, and elevating organizational effectiveness. Now, one of the things we really like about Jonathan's background, he's a chartered mechanical engineer by training, and that gives him a really interesting perspective. He's an Australian turned British person by birth. He also likes adventure and typically a trip to the mountains at any time possible as well. And he's got 3 children. So Jonathan, we're absolutely delighted that you're joining us today. We're really glad. It's taken a little while to get this conversation in place because you've been so busy, but we're really pleased that you can join us today.
Yeah, great intro. And yeah, my Australian background, I keep pretty well hidden. You can see if you can pick up any remnants of it as I speak.
Brilliant. Welcome, Jonathan. Lovely to have you with us. So to just kick us off, just tell us a bit more about Kanso Design and your role.
So we set up Kanso Design about 5.5 years ago. And Garen, as you said, I've been in organization design for a good long while. I've done jobs as a permanent employee. I've done jobs as a contractor. But it was about 6 years ago that I was back in contracting and feeling like maybe there was a little bit more to what we could do. So I was having conversations with 3 others simultaneously. And there were similar sorts of conversations about, it was great being a contractor, and we had some really common values about how we deliver value for organizations, and the fact that, really at the core, and I'll talk a little bit about our values for Kanso Design, but it was really about developing solutions that the client bought into and they were part of. So co-creation was really at the core of that. We saw a lot of consultancies not necessarily doing a good job of it. So between the 4 of us, we decided to set Kanso up. We're an organization design consultancy, and we provide all services relating to organization design. It's a bit of a grey line around the boundaries, as all of our professional scopes are. But yeah, we provide organization design services. We're a team of about 15 people, and we've been going for 5 years.
So, and you're our first organization design guest. So we've had a lot of people who kind of dabble in it and do organization development. How do you define organization design? What does it involve from your perspective?
So I think the core thing around organization design, and I should say, because I know, Danny and Garen, that this is an organization development podcast, so I should contextualize to say that every time I mention OD, I mean organization design. I don't mean organization development. So I think it's really useful, Danny, to kind of make that distinction about what the two are. And so really, I think the core of organization design is about work. It's about what is the work that needs to get done to deliver the strategic ambitions that the organization has got to do, and what is the best way of organizing that work. And of course, in all design, we think about whole system design and think about all the different levers and all the different layers that can be pulled. So it's not just about organization structure, it's not just about role definition, but it's thinking about how the organization works together and how teams cross-cut across the organization and collaborate together, and how things like processes and skills and partners and suppliers and technology and data can all be used to create a system that really works. So organization design is really around models, it's around work, it's about workflow, it's about understanding how those roles can be designed across the organization to best fit in. And I think, just thinking about the distinction between org dev and org design, I think that for me, both of those are informed by strategy. They're both under the banner of organization effectiveness, and they both need huge experience. But I suppose design is more structured, it's more systems thinking, it's more analytical. I suppose detail oriented, there's always this balance about how much detail we go into, but it's about designing the wiring of the organization, whereas maybe org development is more about behavioral science and culture and the people side of things. And really you need both of those to work together to get a really effective organization. Can you sit in both seats at the same time? I think some people do, but I think it's worth saying that it's about coming up to the similar sorts of challenges from 2 very different perspectives, to try to get an organization that's working effectively. And I think either can be a full-time job, and each is definitely a profession in its own right.
And then Kanso Design, that's you've a carefully chosen name. Do you want to tell us a bit more about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So when we started off the journey of Kanso Design sitting in a pub in a basement for about a year. We were having lots of conversations about what was important to us. I talked about our values, and just to say our values quickly, it's about enabling ambition of the organization. It's about simplicity, and design is a complex process, and we always find this job of when we work with our clients of how do we cut through complexity and just make the design process and choices as simple as possible. And the third one is about developing together, which is the co-creation piece that I spoke about before. But we had lots of brainstorming about the brand. Kanso Design came out. Kanso came out. It's a Japanese Zen philosophy, and it means simplicity. So it spoke really well to what we thought was important in design. And it's really about taking complexity and just focusing on the value, focusing on the one thing that matters most, and clearing out all the rest of the clutter so you can get to the best choices for the organization.
When you think about the sectors you work with or the clients, are there particular sectors you kind of focus more on?
So Kanso Design, we work with all sectors. So we're really pleased over the last 5.5 years to have had lots of different clients in both private and public sector. And we constantly have conversations about the benefit of sector expertise, and we recognise that there is a lot of benefit to come from familiarity of sectors. But what we also see is that there's a lot of power in drawing experience and cross-pollination between and across different industries. And I think what's surprising is, we get into organizations and every organization says, oh, my organization is unique. Nobody else has challenges like me. And we all say, well, talk through those challenges. And what we hear are the same sorts of challenges time and times again. It's about clarity of accountabilities. It's about clarity of who owns the decision. It's about challenges with how teams work together. It's about, do we have the right capabilities? It's about, are we really clear that our organization is set up to deliver our strategy in the best way? So those sorts of challenges are ubiquitous, and we see those across all the industries we work in. But no, we've got experience of working across all those, and it's one of the things I love about my job is that I'm working with 3 different clients at the moment, and they're all in completely different sectors, and it brings a huge amount of excitement and interest to the job.
So you have worked with a variety of really interesting organizations like Experian, which is information services, and then you've worked with retail with John Lewis. Like, what are those different kinds of challenges that each of those sectors might be juggling with?
We're constantly hearing that accountabilities aren't clear, that you've got lots of people playing into organizations and that they don't really know where their handoffs are. There are multiple teams working together. Often organizations have got some sort of matrix organization. That's a necessary evil in a lot of organizations, especially where they're global organizations or whether you've got cross-cutting of kind of functions or product areas within the business. Matrix organizations are often a feature, and a lot of people don't like matrix organizations. But whether it's matrix organizations or not, what we see is challenges in how teams really understand their role in the organization, how they collaborate across the organization. So it's really that glue across the organization of how the different parts work together that are the sorts of challenges we face. And when we get into that, there's generally questions about, yes, and if you're really making a decision, you really account clear on who's got the D for some of these things. So I think really kind of ineffective organizations. We also have challenges in regards to efficiency. So often clients come to us and they want to talk about efficiency in their organization. We always balance that with, well, is it efficiency or is it effectiveness you're after? And of course, we always believe that effectiveness comes first. And the first and most important thing is making sure that the organization delivers for its customers and delivers the value it needs to do. And then doing that in the most efficient way is a challenge we face into as well. And one of the other challenges that we're seeing more and more is that people in the organization don't necessarily know how to do organization design, and they want to do organization design and they want to be self-sufficient in organization design. And we love working with our clients to make sure that either through a project or by training, we can help them become more self-sufficient. We can help them do their organization design better themselves. And that's increasingly becoming a challenge that we're seeing organizations coming to us with.
Difficult question for you, but I want to ask about my own curiosity. So is there a sweet spot about when you start thinking about bringing designers in? Because obviously you've got like Dunbar's number at 50. So when things like that, things start to get really complex in terms of relationships, then you get to the point where potentially like they might start function as a functional organization, then reorganize. When is a good time for organizations to start thinking about, I think we should maybe bring an objective view in and start to think about how the different parts fit together and how it all fits into the strategy?
Yeah, it's a challenge that we face in our organization, and for Kanso Design, obviously, I wear 3 hats in my organization, so I'm thinking about delivering great solutions for clients. I'm thinking about running the business, but I'm also thinking about winning new business. And the winning new business part of it, we ask ourselves the question as to exactly that question, Garen, what is the right point, and how do we intersect with organizations at the right time to be able to kind of, meet their need at the right time? But I think that really what we've discovered as we've gone along is that organization design isn't something we can't catalyze that in an organization. That organizations come to their own point in the organization where they realize they've got a challenge. And that can either be a dawning realization where you've got, potentially new members of the leadership team coming in that are catalyzing it, or they're just getting to a point where they're not delivering the results or the value that they need to, or it may be that it's catalyzed through a change. So there might be M&A, or it may be a new strategy that they're trying to develop, or a new product arm they're trying to develop. So I think it can be catalyzed in a lot of ways. But what we're finding is the organization reaches that point of their own accord, and then at the right time, we try to be there so that they can say, listen, we're at the point where we need some support, and we can come in and support them.
And what do you find is the role of diagnostics in this? Because obviously the client's got to the point where things are creaking, and maybe they can't quite realize the ambition, or they've got there's a reason to do it as well. But what role does diagnostics come in to sort of help you understand what's going on here? Because obviously your objective, you're coming in, you've only got a partial view.
Yeah.
What is that pathway?
Yeah, so I mean, it's great. And just to kind of, before I dive into the diagnostic piece, just to say that I think, pretty much every org designer will come in with a pretty standard approach for how you do organization design. And that is, you get in and you do some discovery, you do some analytics, you do some diagnostics to try to understand the organization better, to understand where the organization is trying to get to. And then you move from there into some sort of high-level design and detailed design. Now, that doesn't have to be a very waterfall process. We can do it quite quickly and quite rapidly. And this is one of the challenges that we try to get into with our clients, is how we can get to a good enough answer quickly enough so they can move forward to the next step. But generally, as you say, we start with diagnostics because we need to understand the organization. We often find that actually the organization, the client themselves, they don't understand their organization very well themselves. So there's a huge amount of power in just kind of playing back the as-is state to organizations and getting leaders across the leadership team to all see that in the same way. And you get realizations from that. So internally, we've invested in an analytics and analytics capability. So we're only a small team, but a big part of that small team is our analytics hub. So we've got some analysts, and they always partner with us with our jobs, and they help us with a diagnostic of the organization. And that'll be a number of different things, right? It'll be thinking about the size and shape of the organization. It'll be doing research. It'll be looking at where the organization is trying to head to, but bringing that together so that we can play back in a coherent and really strategic way to the clients, kind of where they're at and where the gaps are. So diagnostics is a huge part of what we do at the start and all the way through the design.
We always ask this question because we always find it really fascinating. But what was your journey to becoming an organization designer?
Well, you've already given a little bit of that away, Garen, by saying that I was an engineer at the start. But yeah, I did. I came over from Australia when I was a kid. I ended up going to Bristol University and doing mechanical engineering. So I studied mechanical engineering and I worked in factories for a few years. And I suppose the engineering, that gave me logical, analytical type skills, problem solving skills. And those sorts of skill sets have stayed with me and kind of stayed core to who I am today and what I do. And I think that one of the key things that I bring to organization design is that kind of systems thinking. I studied systems thinking at university. And so I like to bring that whole systems design aspect to all the work that I do. So I think that engineering gave me that. It also gave me some people management on the shop floor. I then went into consulting, and I was doing project and program management consulting with PA Consulting for 6 or 7 years. And through that, I learned two things. I learned how to run projects and programs, and I also learned my consulting skills as well. So that's kind of what I got from that phase of my life. And then somebody came up with this great idea that I should join the team called Organization Effectiveness. And I had no idea what it was at the time, but I jumped in with both feet, and I've never left since. And pretty quickly in organization effectiveness, I honed in on design. I think because it married up with those engineering skill sets that I began with in my career. And yeah, I've just found a real home for myself. I just really enjoy the problem solving and the working with clients. So I haven't moved anywhere else.
And it's really interesting. You touched on something, organization effectiveness. I think one of the things that we're finding from the podcast is just there's no two definitions of it. So that organization effectiveness team that you invited into, what was their task? What were they, what was their mandate?
Well, I think organization effectiveness, I mean, these terms all swim around each other and they're also blurry. And I think, organization development, organization design, organization effectiveness, they're the same sorts of things. But I think that largely, I think that organization effectiveness brings together the organization design elements and the organization development elements. So I bring that together. But you can also have things, in my mind, I would sort of say that organization effectiveness has a change element to it as well, because you really need to apply the change. Often it can have a communication or employee engagement aspect to it as well. So I think organization effectiveness can have all of those things, but it's probably the broader sense of the term as to how do you get an organization to really being full organizational health across all aspects. And that needs some design, it needs some change, and it definitely needs some organization development as well.
So one of the things we like to do on this is just demystify kind of the field of organization development, organization design. So what's a typical week look like for you? What are you involved in doing?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I said before that there are a few different aspects of my role as a leader, as a small consultancy, for a small consultancy, and those are firstly business development. So I have to think about winning new business and converting that new business, and that means constantly speaking to clients about their challenges and how we can help address those challenges. Secondly, I need to run the business. So in our organization, we've got 4 partners, and between us we split up the roles, and I've picked up 2 quite fundamental elements. So I run the people side of things. I'm the HR director for Kanso Design, but I also run the sales process as well. So through that, I'm always thinking about this balance between supply and demand, and how does the staff that we have match the demand, and when do we need to reach into our broader pool of associates to kind of fulfill that demand as well. So that's a constant juggling act that will never go away. And of course, the third and most important one is actually delivering great solutions to clients. So my week will be a jumble of all of those 3. And I think that one of the things I love about my job, and I think probably many busy people love, is the juggling of different priorities. And I love the fact that I'll be talking about delivering one project here, talking about delivering another project here, and I can play different roles on that. I can either be leading a project where there's a team of people who are delivering a design solution, playing a QA role, playing a guidance role, and playing a client relationship role. Or in a lot of cases, us as partners are absolutely doing the work. We're getting in and we're kind of drawing the models, we're doing the activity analysis, we're doing the as-is analysis. I've just come out of a really in-depth project doing an organization diagnostic for a client, which went on for 2 months. We delivered a really thorough report on that, and I had my hands all over that. So sometimes leading, sometimes doing, but balanced with meetings. So always dotted through the week are conversations with clients to say, what sort of challenges are you having, and how can we help address those? And as you said, Garen, earlier on, that when those challenges come up, it's not as simple as, you've got a solution, this is how we're going to help fulfill that solution. It takes real thinking about, right? Before we start off a project, we really have to think carefully about what is the best solution. There's no one way of tackling design problems. So we have to be really considered to really understand where the client's at, really understand what they're trying to achieve, what their organization can deliver, where they need help, and how we can get the right balance and mix of scope so that we're delivering something that's really effective for them. And coaching them often in the process as well, because often, clients are coming to us for our expertise, and that means they don't always know how to do this. So helping the clients to think about how they do it and how they can get value from it is an important part of it as well. My week, therefore, is kind of mixed with client meetings, delivery meetings, but also running the BD call, operations calls. It's a whole bag of different things, and that variety is something that I really enjoy.
And then when you think about org design, what do people get wrong most often? What are the myths about organization design you like to
Where do I
tackle?
start with that? I used to work with a lady in Burberry. I'll plug Jamie, and I loved what she was she was a tutor in my early days in organization design. I think when I was working at Burberry, I was there for 7 years. That's when I really cut my teeth and got into organization design. And I think I discovered then that the best way of knowing that you know your trade is when you have to train other people. And it was at Burberry that I started training other people across the organization and how to do organization design. But my mentor, she said that she always came into conversation saying the first thing they do is put an organization structure on the desk. It's like, we just push that to one side, because organization design isn't about organization structures. But of course, this is the misnomer that people come in and they think what I need is a structure chart. But it's not a structure chart. What you need is to understand where you are, understand where you're trying to get to, and understand the work that needs to be done in your organization and across your organization to get that strategy delivered. So fundamentally, it's about the work and about mapping out the to be with a future focused mind about mapping out that work and designing an organization, including structure charts, including role definition, including workflows and how decisions are distributed across the organization and what sort of capabilities you need. It's not just about structure charts. So I think that's probably one of the big misnomers. Another big challenge we get is organizations just really struggling to let today go and being really future focused and kind of just releasing the shackles of the constraints of today's organization. And we're constantly, trying to build, well, we're constantly building that into our conversation, keeping in the future, unlocking, what would you do if you're designing an organization with a blank sheet of paper? And finally, probably the third one, these are just off the top of my head. The other one that leaders love to do is to design around the people that they've got. So the reason we're at a job really as organization design professionals often is not just because of the expertise, but because leaders haven't really got the time to think about how they set up their organizations. And Garen, we've said, this is something I've said in our conversations, is that leaders come to this and they're promoted because of their skill in a certain function or discipline. Their development that they have is about behavioral. It's about setting. It's about role modeling. It's about change leadership. But really, there's a missing in organization, in leadership development around organization design. There's a core job of leaders, which is to set up their stall in the right way. And that means making sure that everybody in their organization knows what they need to do, knows how they fit in, and knows how information and decisions flow across the organization. And I think there's probably, in my mind, there's not enough focus in leadership development on that. It's before you get to the change piece. What are you actually setting your organization up to do, and how are you setting it up in the best way? So I think one of the challenges we have is leaders who don't really get organization design. They don't really understand it because that's not what they've come from. But of course, that's what we're there to help them with, to help them through that process. And we see a really big spectrum between leaders that get it and leaders who really struggle with it. So I think that's one of the balances what we're always managing as we go along as well.
I think it's something we find as well. It's just getting leaders or find this headspace just to look up and look forward rather than just be in the moment firefighting.
Yeah. I'll play one more in as well if I can, and that's just really about kind of strategic alignment. I think we love to get into organizations at the starting point. What are you trying to achieve as an organization? Where are you trying to head? And one of the questions we ask is, are you clear on your strategy? And generally, we get a lot of nods around the table of everybody says, yes, we're clear on our strategy. So you then go and ask 5 or 6 leaders what their strategy is, and you get 5 or 6 different answers. And often there's a lot of similarity, but often there's a lot of difference as well. So one of the challenges is, well, one of the opportunities there is to play it back and to really kind of build alignment around that through the work that we do. So that's another feature that plays into our work.
There's a real psychological element to this, isn't there? There is the understanding processes and changing systems and that as well. But I guess it's getting them to actually visualize the organization in a different way. That kind of traditional thing we hold on to, which is the organization chart, the thing that gets shown on day one. So it's educating them to look at it in a different way. And then the other thing is, you talk about the ones that get it and don't get it. There's a certain amount of assertiveness in this, though, isn't there? Because you are potentially moving people out of roles. You're delving into the world of consultation. There is risk attached to that as well. How do you help managers get through those phases with them?
I suppose lots of different questions in there, and it kind of gets me thinking about lots of different things. One of the key things we have to do at the start of an organization design process is to think about who's going to be involved. And there's a real balance within this, is that we think about closed design and open design and people-centered design. So at the smallest end, you can have a small group of people who are, leaders in the organization. You can come up with an answer and you can move forward with that answer. At the other end of the spectrum, you can engage a really large number of people across the organization through surveys or working groups or whatever it is, so that you can get a much broader level of input. I mean, just between those, obviously, you can move faster with a smaller group, and engaging lots of people takes longer. So there is an aspect of how much effort and how much resource there is and how much time you want to spend on it. But obviously, the more people you engage, then the more likely you are to get to an answer that A, is going to work, and B, that people are going to commit to because they've helped co-create it, right? That's just a big part of the process.
I'm just interested when you think about that kind of participative, kind of involving people, engaging people. Have you got a preference in terms of?
So I think I know a lot of designers, and I'm passionate about involving people across the organization, about taking people along the way. But I also know that a really big challenge for organizations is not over-egging things as well. And actually, that I think there's a sweet spot really. What you need is enough just subject matter expertise, enough knowledge of the business about where it is, how work gets done. You just need enough of that to be able to come up with an answer. I think what's really important as you go along is that you're engaging throughout. But I think that as soon as you say to somebody, we're starting a design process, then the change has started. The change doesn't start when you say we've got we've got a solution, we now move to one implementation. That's the latter parts of the stages. The change starts as soon as you have a conversation. So in order to say, okay, well, I want to do a design piece of work, will you partake in that? The immediate thing for every contributor is, well, what might that mean for me? How's that going to affect my role? Does that mean I'm out of a job? Does that mean that actually I'm going to have to give this up or give that up? So we have to build a lot of trust at the start of the process, and also encourage people to really think on behalf of the organization, not themselves, to step out of their role, to think at an enterprise level and on behalf of the wider organization. So I think that's something that we have to manage. But of course, the more people you do that, the more people you engage in the design conversations and the optionality, then the more challenging that becomes, or the more effort has to go into not just engaging them in the design conversation, but also managing the change side of it as well. I think in my sweet spot, it's having a small enough group that you can move quickly, big enough group that you've got design expertise in there and you can get to a robust answer. But then I think importantly, sharing incomplete thoughts as you go along. So if you get to a high level stage and you think, listen, we haven't decided about the impact on individual roles yet. We don't know what that is yet, but broadly we're heading in this direction. And that's a point that you can engage teams and test thinking and get teams to contribute and say, well, actually, no, I've got a better idea. And sometimes you can get really great ideas out of that sort of process.
Testing thinking is so important, isn't it? Because you want the operational reality in the conversation, not kind of just a kind of ivory tower version of the way the organization works.
What do you enjoy most about your role? Like, is it a particular part of the process? Is it, or like, what is it you enjoy most about the org design element?
I love juggling. I love the multiple priorities. I love being able to work between all these different things. But I think what goes hand in hand in that is I feel really lucky to be able to get into different client organizations and be sitting in those contexts and learn about the organizations. I said that the third value of Kanso Design was about developing together. And what I really love about that value is there's two sides to it. There's developing it together in terms of we develop, we co-create together. But there's also we develop together, we learn together. And so I really believe that as you go through a design process, everybody's learning. For some people, it's about learning about organization design. For me, it's about learning about the client. It's about learning about the different contexts and the different challenges that organizations have and thinking, well, how can I pull that in and enrich my own understanding of organization design and industries? So I think I just feel really lucky that I'm able to work across in parallel in multiple places, different client organizations and different different stakeholders. I think that's what I enjoy about my job the most.
And is there anything particularly interesting you in the kind of field of organization design? Any new things coming through that you're interested in?
Well, there are, and I've got to say, I'm a bit of maybe I'm too traditional on this, but I think that there's this real balance between innovation and just doing things well and simply. And I think there's some really good, solid logic in organization design in just trusting the process and applying the process in a really robust way. So that's really understanding, the organization where they're trying to get to, really thinking about the optionality, really, making sure that you've got whole system solutions that are going to work in practice. So I'm a big believer in doing the basics well and doing the core well. Of course, there's always lots of new innovations coming out. But if I'm honest, I think that a lot of those innovations, they're quite hard to apply, and they may be specific, they may be relevant to very specific organizations and specific contexts. But the value I find in organizations is doing the basics well and delivering design well.
Do you ever have people pick up the phone and go, I want to have it like Spotify. I want squads.
We have, but I mean, is that innovation anymore? I mean, that's been around for so long. We do get that. Of course, we get that. And we get organizations with predefined views, perspectives of what they want, exactly as you've said. And we definitely had that. We want it like Spotify. But of course, we all know that Spotify works at Spotify. Spotify doesn't work anywhere else. And anybody who's implemented an agile organization kind of knows that you need to build it around your organization and your context. And I think that context is so important. I think, we talk about benchmarking in organization design, and clients love to say, give me some benchmarking that will give me the answer. And I think there's a real balance between that. And stealing good ideas is a great thing to do. And, we should always take great ideas from other organizations and try to apply them, but they have to work for the organization. And I think pretty quickly, you look at benchmarking and you can say, well, A, how much can we really rely on the data? Like, is it really kind of telling us the truth? But B, actually, how applicable it is to our context. And the benchmarking to that organization, well, it's slightly different, and they're trying to do slightly different things, and they're in a different market, and they've got a different shape. So I think there is value in benchmarking, and there's definitely value in research and understanding different ways of doing things and stealing good ideas. But also, I want us to be cautious about benchmarking as well, and the extent of the value that can have. And it's not a crutch for leaders that they say, well, okay, if that organization does it, it must be right for us. Often that's not the right answer. And like the Spotify example, it needs different application to make it really work for that client.
Yeah, we've quickly come to conclusion. If we launch the podcast again, we call it Depends. Because
you got the insight already, Garen.
We should have trademarked that name as well, shouldn't we?
Should. I was going to say, yeah. So one thing we often see with organisations is they oscillate between they'll go with things like a centralised approach, and then they'll go to decentralisation, and then back again. Do you see that a lot in the work that you do with kind of organisations?
I mean, my perspective on this, and I think that there's no perfect model. We know it's like, project managers know that when they develop a plan, the plan's not right. As soon as they start to deploy it, well, something changes. And it's the same with design. We can't design a perfect design. Everything's going to be imperfect. What we can do is give you a good model and a good set of outcomes or structure that allows you to move towards that. You've got to constantly reinvent it, and you've got to apply it. And as you're changing and as you're implementing it, you have to learn from that and then continue to adjust. So I think, to talk about what you were saying there, Danny, about this kind of pendulum, what you really get is you get organizations saying, oh, this matrix organization doesn't work. Matrix organizations must be the problem. The problem isn't necessarily the model. The problem is potentially how the model is being implemented. And I think this is where you get this pendulum swinging. We tried centralization, that wasn't quite right. Now we've tried kind of deploying it out to local, that's not quite right. The truth of the matter is, the best answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And the best way of getting to the answer is to sweat the detail, to sweat the logic, to say, okay, we can prove through good design thinking that this model, somewhere in the middle probably, is the right answer. The challenge then is then applying it and really applying it well. And one of the big challenges with matrix organizations is they don't work because people aren't told how they're supposed to play within a matrix organization. They're not told about their jobs. They're not told about, what's my relationship with this person supposed to be? What's my relationship with that person supposed to be? And who makes the decision? That's not clarified. So what happens is organizations develop a matrix model, put it in place, and then don't tell anybody how they're supposed to play with it, and then wonder why it hasn't worked. So I think really it's about sweating the detail enough that people who are actually in the jobs know how they play in the organization and really kind of focus on implementing it. And for me, that's the risk about pendulum swinging, that you don't want this and you don't want that. You really need to focus on just getting one model or a model that works for you today, and really applying that in practice and thinking about how you do that. And I think things like role design are really important as well. This is this balance between high-level models in design versus detail. But it's really important for every individual in the organization to be able to jump into a job and say, listen, I understand what the scope of my job is. I understand what I'm supposed to do versus other people in my team or in corresponding teams, how work flows between us, what those handoffs are, and what you're expecting of me and what you're not expecting of me. And that comes down to just designing jobs really well. And this is where I think design is really interesting, because it needs this really strategic high-level model thinking, but it also needs to be able to get down to individual jobs and say, this is what's expected from you in your job, so that individuals are clear. And that's those balance from strategic conversations to quite detail-oriented or definitions is one of the things I really like about the job. Partly strategic, partly analytical and detail.
And what do you think gets in the way? Because everything you've described makes complete logical sense. But why is it that organizations may shy away from that level of detail?
I think I think there's quite an easy answer for that, which is design thinking takes quite a lot of time, right? You have to invest in design thinking. And I think that busy leaders who have got other things to worry about, performance issues with their team, performance issues with their organization, stakeholders to manage, risks appearing, that's their day-to-day. And so leaders don't really have the time and the bandwidth to be able to spend lots of time on design. But to think about design properly, it does take time. It's an investment to really understand do they really understand where they are today? Do they really have alignment about where they're trying to get to? Often that alignment isn't there, as I said before, to the degree that you'd want it. And then kind of all of those thoughts about, well, what are the different interpretations? How could we model this? What are the options? How do we access those options? So by the time you actually get to the point where you say, this is the model, like leaders have often said, okay, well, I'm exhausted, but not exhausted, but you know, I've invested a lot in this process, so they just want to get on with it. So I think one of the challenges is leaders trying to move ahead too quickly without saying, okay, we've got this in terms of a broad high-level design, but actually sweating this into the details so that individuals are clear takes another level of work. And I think it's just about encouraging leaders to kind of stay true to the course and work that through. The worst thing you can do, and I think it comes back to Danny's point about Pendulum, is you design a model, you throw it in too quickly before you really thought about how it's going to work in practice. And then it doesn't work in practice, and then you say the model was wrong. So I think it comes back to a similar sort of point.
Yeah, there's an element of sticking with it, isn't there? And working through the difficult bits and making it work.
And that doesn't have to, that doesn't have to take huge amounts of time. You can accelerate that really quickly. And I think as well, we were talking earlier about when you can engage people. I think that detailed design is a good time to engage more people because they're a bit closer to the work. And of course, I think the more you can engage people, then the more likely it is to stick because you're engaging the people who are actually going to be doing the work as well.
And what do you find most challenging about the work you do?
So I think it's probably a couple of things. I think that one of the things that we're really constantly challenging ourselves with is this balance between robust, thorough design versus moving at pace and recognizing the costs and the time challenges and the pressures that organizations are under to move ahead quickly. So I think I said before about you can have quite a waterfall approach, which can take quite a long time, but we're constantly challenging ourselves to say, how can we get to a design answer more quickly? And where is it appropriate to move ahead and say, actually, we don't need a perfect answer here. We just need 80% because that's enough for us to move forward versus where do we actually need to sweat the detail, and I was saying before, to kind of get stuff right. So I think that's one of the balances we're trying to get to. We're always thinking that design and change isn't the old school design and change, which we have to design everything and then we implement everything in one go. Design and change is a journey for organizations, and that means you can design in pockets across the organization. You get different parts working in different phases. You can really prioritize. So that balance of where to focus and how to prioritize and how quickly we can accelerate to get them to value is definitely one challenge that we're thinking about. And I think the other one, it probably comes back to leadership again. Do they really understand even what organization design is? I think that in the organization development world, I think you've probably got a similar challenge as to getting leaders to really understanding the value that organization development can bring. And it's the same with design. Everybody's got a different lens on what organization design is. And many people think it's an organization structure chart. So just getting people to understand what a design process is and what that means in terms of, blue sky thinking, in terms of having a clear mindset, in terms of letting go of the past, in terms of options. Really important as a part of design is thinking about options and really giving yourself time to explore options in order to have confidence that the one you choose to go with is the right one. So I think it's probably getting leaders to really understand what organization design is and the value it can add and why we go through a process in the way that we do.
So if you look back at your career and all the kind of various roles and organizations you've been involved in, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned so far that you carry with you?
I think probably the first one is that starting and running your own business is actually hard work, like they say it is. So we've been doing this for 6 years now, and it's full on, but in a really rewarding and enjoyable way. But I think it's getting your feet into the shoes where you realize the kind of real implications of that. But I think from a design perspective, I think probably a few things. I think one is the importance of context. So organizations need to be relevant, and they need to be designed in a way that takes into account and is relevant to their context. So really kind of putting your feet in the context of the organization, understanding that is a huge part of making sure that you're developing solutions that are going to work in practice. I think keeping it simple, I said Kanso Design, Kanso is keeping it simplicity. It is simplicity. That's really challenging because some of these conversations are really complex. There's a lot of complexity in organizations, and that's one of the things that we really challenge ourselves to do on behalf of our client, is to simplify things as much as possible and just to make the choices as clear and transparent. So that's always a journey. And I think the third one is probably that one that I just talked about, which is change doesn't have to be big bang. It's not about sort of saying, listen, we're going to fix everything in one go and scaring the horses. It's about saying, what are the problems we can fix today? Some of those problems, if you're going to redesign a model, they're quite chunky questions, but how can we chunk it up and how can we do it so it's more of a journey and so that leaders and organizations can feel the benefit of that as they go along rather than kind of waiting for some big bang. So I think that not trying to fix everything in one go would be another learning.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we were talking to someone from the Department of Work and Pensions who does the design there. And as you sort of said, a lot of organizations are actually switching over to continuous design because that kind of big bang approach raises anxiety, doesn't it, as well? Do you feel that organizations adopting that kind of pose is potentially a positive way of seeing organization design so it can happen much more around the work as it's required?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll segue into another aspect of what we do, which I talked about briefly, which is about efficiencies. And I think you always get this with efficiencies where, you know, maybe the organization gets a little bit too fat or a little bit too heavy, or maybe performance goes down. And then the CFO comes in and says, listen, we can't afford this anymore. We need to take 10% out of our organization, go. And I'm sure we've all seen circumstances where that is done in an ill-elegant way. And actually it's done in a kind of, we're just going to cross boxes off an organization, salami slicing. And ultimately, that really damages organizations. You know, a much more grown up way of doing it, a much more mature way of doing it is having a culture of efficiency and recognizing that efficiency isn't a step change that you make periodically. It's a way of being. And I think it's the same with design. It's about recognizing that change is a constant and you're constantly revising and trying to optimize your design, thinking both about efficiency and effectiveness within that rather than a big bang.
How do you invest in your own learning and development? What does that look like for you?
So I'm a practitioner, and I kind of learned this as I went along. Is that actually I learn best by doing, and I think I love that because, you know, as you said, Garen, I've been lucky enough to work with lots of different organisations on lots of design challenges. I also said that I think in Burberry I realised that as soon as you realise you have to train people, then it really sharpens your sword. You know, you really have to know, well, actually, I've got to be able to articulate this in a way that is going to provide insight and provide benefit for others. So I think that as I've gone along, I've used actually training others as a mechanism for making sure that I'm ahead of my game as well, and staying on top of that. But I'd say that every single client job we do as a learning organization, you know, we do research as part of that work, and you know, lucky enough to work within a great team of designers, and we're all different. We all bring different experience, so it's great to be able to share knowledge. At the end of every project we do, we really have the belief that it's important to take stock and learn. And it's great to say that, but we actually do it. You know, we apply that. So just on Friday morning, we were doing a wrap up for a project that we finished a couple of weeks ago, and we spent an hour and a half just going through all of the different project aspects of the projects and thinking about what can we learn organizationally. You know, how does that affect our practice? But also what can we learn individually as well? And what can I take away from that? What did I do well? What could I maybe kind of take away from my next? So I think it's largely through the work that we do, but of course we do rely on research as well. And I would say as well, I'm using ChatGPT on a regular basis now. You know, as it came out, I was, you know, not wary of it, but not sure how I use it. I dip into it at least once a week now. And I'm constantly getting good insights from there, as well as kind of web browsing too.
One of the reasons why we set up the podcast is to inspire the next generation of org designers and org developers as well. So, and people that are watching this, they could be actually within an HR function seeing design being done badly or opportunities to improve, or they could be an external person that's curious. What advice would you give to someone who's actually potentially considering starting out in organization design or at the beginning of that journey?
The first one, I'd say do it. It's a great career. I love, you know, it's to be able to go into organizations and to be fortunate enough to learn about those organizations and to be in the different contexts and at a really strategic level, understanding where organizations are going, what they're stuck with, and helping organizations overcome that by providing solutions to that is a really great career for, I don't know, I mean, it certainly attracts me, right? So I'd say do it. I think that it's really important that you build your skill set in it. So I think, you know, get experience in designing solutions, make sure you actually be clear on the distinction between development and design as well. That, you know, the system, the design thinking it is design. I mean, it's called design for a reason. You go through a design process, all of those different things I've talked about, solutionizing, building models. You need to sort of really enjoy those and problem solving as well. I think you need to be good with strategy and with analytics. And I'd say get good at analytics because it's a really core tool. I still, you know, work with spreadies and work with data, and because actually it's really important to understand the detail as well as being at strategic level. So I'd say familiarize yourself with strategic thinking, but also get good at handling data and being able to do analytics as well. But I think build breadth of experience is really key. And I think there's probably two main routes into organization design. You can either kind of join a big consultancy when you kind of start a career and, you know, you just do organization from design one. but pretty much all the org designers I know, like me, had a job beforehand. I was an engineer. Another one of my colleagues was an engineer, another one was in finance. So they had a career beforehand and they did jobs beforehand. And I think that experience of actually being in an organization and being on the other side is really important. So build breadth of experience, I think, is a really big part of it.
Loads of really good advice as well. Thank you. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We've really enjoyed the conversation, been really insightful. It's definitely started to unveil some of the mystery behind organization design. Danny, what are some of the things that you're taking away from the conversation?
So much. I think maybe the fact that context is king. So context really, really matters. And that's important to understand the context you're working in. The importance of being really focused on what the organization needs to deliver for its customers. So it's not about the org chart, it's about really understanding the organization before you start. And probably something about trade-offs, that there's no perfect answer. So it's coming up with the one that best meets your needs and working with it.
Yeah, I had 4, but it's now 3 now. So it's just took one. The things I'm taking away is the problem isn't about the model. It's about the implementation. And I think that's quite liberating, isn't it? So it's not an ideological discussion people are having. It's like, no, so what is it and what's happened so far? I really like the bit that Jonathan said about people aren't given enough information about their roles. They understand the case for and they understand the boundaries, but they really need more information to be set up for success as well. That's a level of detail that organizations need to invest time in, but managers often don't give themselves enough time to do it as well. And I guess one of the other things is just the tensions that you're constantly wrestling in organization design as well, like the need for a thorough, robust design process, but pace, because often the drivers require pace as well. And that need between efficiency and effectiveness, all those kind of tensions you're currently wrestling as well. So I found it fascinating. So Jonathan, you joined on.
We could have just cut the interview and said that. I mean,
yeah, we had to hear you say all that.
I really enjoyed it, and it's always nice to talk about your trade, isn't it? So listen, thanks a lot for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's really good. Thank you. And you join our portfolio of over 30 different guests that we've invited onto the podcast now from all different professions within org development and org design as well. And Jonathan, I think you take a brilliant place in there as well. I think people are going to get a lot of value as well. If people want to reach out to you, or if they want to follow your work, or if they're curious to learning more about the Kanso way, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, like we all are. Jonathan Edwards, search Jonathan Edwards at Kanso Design, Kanso, and please follow Kanso Design as well. We're doing lots of great work, and we tell lots of great stories on LinkedIn on a regular basis too. I'm pleased to hear from anybody about whether you're trying to come into design for the first time, or whether you've got a challenge that we can help you with, any or all of the above and anything in between.
And whether you're listening on the podcast or whether you're listening to on YouTube, all of Jonathan's details will be in the show notes as well. So thank you. Again, a huge thank you for being so generous with your time, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. And thank you again. It's great.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Gary.